Nathan Whitmore's life was a glossy montage of rooftop parties, luxury cars, and exotic vacations. His Instagram feed brimmed with curated snapshots of him in designer suits at art galleries, laughing with impossibly beautiful women, and sipping champagne in private jets. A new girlfriend graced his arm every month, always stunning, always photogenic, and always temporary. His followers adored him. Comments poured in, praising his charm, his looks, and his glamorous life. To the outside world, Nathan had it all. To his parents, Elias and Celeste, he was a crisis waiting to happen. The Whitmore confectionery empire, a legacy that spanned 5 generations, had been their life's work. Once the undisputed leader in the luxury sweets market, the business had taken a hit in recent years. Competitors had adopted innovative techniques, and consumers gravitated toward brands with modern appeal. Elias and Celeste had weathered downturns before, but this time felt different. Their son's cavalier lifestyle didn't help. While they worked tirelessly to salvage their legacy, Nathan flaunted wealth as though it would never run out. One chilly evening, Nathan arrived at his parents' mansion after an influencer event, his tuxedo jacket draped casually over his shoulder. The house was unusually quiet, save for the crackle of the fireplace in the sitting room. His parents sat side by side, their expressions grave. "Sit down, Nathan," Elias said, gesturing to the armchair across from them. Nathan raised a brow but obeyed, sinking into the leather chair with the air of someone about to endure a lecture. "What's this about? You both look like someone canceled Christmas." Celeste's lips tightened. "This is serious, Nathan. We need to talk about the future of the company." He groaned. "Not this again. I'm not a business guy, remember? That's your thing. It won't be our thing much longer if something doesn't change," Elias snapped. "The company is bleeding, Nathan. We're being outpaced at every turn. This isn't about you anymore. It's about preserving what 5 generations built." Nathan waved a hand dismissively. "So hire consultants, shake up the marketing. Isn't that what people do? Why drag me into it?" "Because we have a solution," Celeste said. Her tone was too calm, the kind she used when delivering bad news. "And it involves you." Elias leaned forward, his eyes hard. "We're finalizing a partnership with the Aldens." Nathan frowned. "The Aldens? The secret recipe people? Aren't they the reclusive ones who barely attend industry events?" Celeste nodded. "Their family business has global reach and heritage that aligns perfectly with ours. If we join forces, we'll dominate the market. But there's one condition." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Let me guess. You want me to be the face of the company? Play nice with some Alden execs for a PR campaign? Fine. Whatever." Elias shook his head. "Not quite. The Alden's condition is marriage." Nathan blinked, unsure he'd heard correctly. "Excuse me?" "Their only daughter, Serena, has agreed to the arrangement," Celeste said. "She's reserved, intelligent, and—" "Hold on," Nathan interrupted, sitting up straight. "You're saying I have to marry a stranger to save the company? Are you out of your minds?" "This isn't up for debate," Elias said firmly. "The Aldens are traditional. They see this union as a way to cement our alliance. It's not uncommon in families like ours. This will make sure that none will get into the alliance for the short term, or only to dismantle the other part's business." Nathan laughed, though it lacked humor. "Not uncommon? It's archaic. This isn't the 1800s, Dad. I'm not marrying someone I've never met just so you can secure a business deal." "You've met plenty of women," Celeste retorted. "And none of them stick around longer than a photo shoot. Your reputation doesn't exactly scream stability, Nathan. It's time to grow up." "That's low, even for you," Nathan muttered, running a hand through his hair. "What's so special about this Serena, anyway?" Why does she need me? She can't be that great if her parents are forcing her into this, too. Her family values privacy, Celeste explained. She's been raised away from the spotlight, but she's deeply committed to her family's legacy. Serena isn't interested in frivolity or social media. She's everything you're not. Nathan rolled his eyes. Sounds thrilling. Elias sighed, the lines on his face deepening. You don't have a choice, Nathan. The agreement is already in motion. If you refuse, we lose the partnership, and the company may not survive. And your lifestyle will not survive either. Anger boiled under Nathan's skin. So, that's it? I'm just supposed to sacrifice my life because you mismanaged the business. This isn't a sacrifice, Celeste said sharply. It's an opportunity. Serena's family is offering a chance to secure our future. You owe it to this family to step up. Nathan stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. I don't owe you anything, he snapped. If this is your idea of a solution, count me out. He stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. His parents remained seated, their silence heavy with disappointment. Over the next few days, Nathan tried to shake the conversation from his mind. He threw himself into parties, snapped selfies with models, and filled his feed with exaggerated smiles. But the reality of his situation gnawed at him. The more he thought about it, the more trapped he felt. His parents had made it clear, his compliance wasn't optional. A week later, Nathan found himself standing outside the Alden family estate, a sprawling manor surrounded by manicured gardens. He had reluctantly agreed to meet Serena, if only to see what kind of woman would go along with such a ridiculous arrangement. Dressed impeccably, he intended to project an air of indifference. Serena Alden's world was a study in restraint. The Alden estate, tucked away in the rolling hills of Vermont, echoed the same quiet dignity as its owners. Its sprawling gardens, immaculately trimmed, and the stately manor house stood as symbols of a family deeply rooted in tradition. While Nathan Whitmore's days were a whirlwind of flashing cameras and glittering parties, Serena's life unfolded in a much smaller, quieter circle. Educated at home by private tutors, she had grown up immersed in literature, art, and the intricate science behind her family's renowned confectionery recipes. She had never attended a school dance, never posted a photo on Instagram, and never cared to. Her parents, Judith and Robert Alden, believed that privacy was a virtue and that the family's legacy thrived in discretion. Public appearances were rare, and when Serena did accompany them to a gala or business function, she remained in the background, veiled and enigmatic. The veil had begun as a tradition during her teenage years, a nod to their heritage, but over time it became a shield, insulating her from the judgment and superficiality she found in the outside world. Now, standing in the sunlit sitting room of her home, Serena prepared herself to meet Nathan Whitmore, the man her parents had chosen for her to marry. She smoothed the fabric of her cream-colored dress, her movements precise and deliberate. The veil, a gossamer layer of fabric, fell delicately over her face, hiding her features while allowing her sharp gray eyes to remain visible. She knew what this meeting represented, a merging of legacies, a transaction dressed as a union. Her parents had assured her that Nathan was capable, though his reputation painted a picture of someone more interested in appearances than substance. It didn't matter. She had agreed to this, as she always did, for the sake of the family. Nathan arrived with all the presence of someone who was used to being noticed. He stepped into the room wearing an impeccably tailored navy suit, his confident stride faltering slightly when his eyes landed on Serena. He hadn't known what to expect, but the veil threw him off guard. It wasn't what he'd imagined, and it only fueled the irritation he'd felt since learning of this arrangement. "Miss Alden," he said, his voice polite but edged with skepticism. "It's a pleasure." Serena inclined her head, her posture as composed as her voice. "Mr. Whitmore." "Call me Nathan," he said, though his tone lacked warmth. He gestured vaguely at her veil. "So, is this religious?" Her lips twitched into a small smile. No. But it is part of who I am. He frowned. I'm guessing that means it's staying on? For now, she replied evenly. Does it bother you? He huffed a short laugh. Bother me? No, not at all. It's just, strange. Strange, she echoed, her voice light but pointed. Or simply unfamiliar? Nathan crossed his arms, glancing at her parents seated nearby as if searching for answers. They observed the exchange silently, their expressions neutral. He turned back to Serena. You don't think it's odd to meet your future husband while wearing a veil? Most people prefer to see the person they're going to marry. Serena tilted her head slightly, her gaze steady. Most people aren't in our situation. Nathan's jaw tightened. And what situation is that? A marriage of convenience, she said simply. You and I both know this isn't about love. It's about what our families gain from it. Her calmness was infuriating. He ran a hand through his hair, struggling to maintain his composure. So that's it? You're fine with being part of some business transaction? If it benefits our families, yes. Are you not? Nathan opened his mouth to argue but stopped himself. There was something maddening about her poise, as though she had already won a game he didn't know he was playing. He straightened his tie, his frustration simmering beneath the surface. Fine. Have it your way. But don't expect me to pretend this is normal. Serena's eyes softened, though her voice remained measured. I wouldn't dream of it. After the meeting ended, Nathan left the estate with barely a word to his parents, his irritation boiling over the moment they returned to the Whitmore mansion. He stormed into the sitting room with Elias and Celeste, their expressions expectant. Unbelievable, Nathan snapped, pacing the room like a caged animal. You've got to be kidding me with this. She wears a veil to meet her fiancé? What is that supposed to mean? She's either hiding something hideous, or she's just playing games. Celeste raised an eyebrow. Did you consider that she might have her own reasons for it? Reasons? Nathan scoffed. Like what? She's probably trying to hide some massive flaw. Maybe he stopped himself, shaking his head. It doesn't matter. You can't seriously expect me to go through with this. Elias leaned forward, his tone firm. This isn't about your preferences, Nathan. It's about the future of the company. Nathan rounded on him. Why does it have to be me? Why not someone else? Because you're the face of this family, Elias said sharply. You've built a public persona that's valuable. Pairing you with someone like Serena, who has the Aldens' legacy and sophistication, creates the perfect image. Nathan laughed bitterly. The perfect image? She's practically a ghost. No one even knows what she looks like. How's that going to help us? Enough, Celeste interjected. You've made your point, but this isn't a debate. The Aldens are offering us a chance to save the company, and Serena is part of the deal. The wedding date is set. You'll do your part. Nathan stared at them, his anger giving way to disbelief. You're serious. You're actually going through with this. Yes, Elias said firmly. And so are you. Nathan shook his head, his thoughts racing. Every instinct told him to rebel, to walk away from this charade, but deep down he knew the truth. He was completely dependent on the family's money. His parents had made their decision, and no amount of arguing would change it. He left the room without another word, retreating to his own space. As he stood by the window overlooking the city lights, he couldn't shake the memory of Serena's calm demeanor, her enigmatic presence. He hated that he couldn't figure her out, hated the way she seemed so unbothered by it all. The Whitmore Alden wedding was the kind of event society pages would gush over for weeks. Held at an ivy-covered cathedral in New England, the ceremony combined old-world elegance with modern opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceilings, illuminating rows of white orchids cascading down the aisle. Guests whispered about the grandeur, though much of their curiosity fixated on the bride who had managed to remain a mystery. Nathan stood at the altar, his jaw tight, the polished image of a groom. His fitted tuxedo and sharp features should have made him the picture of confidence, but his stiff posture and clenched fists betrayed his frustration. He had smiled for the cameras, played his part during the pre-ceremony photos, and accepted every congratulatory handshake with practiced ease. But now, as Serena stepped into view, the veil shrouding her face, his composure wavered. She glided down the aisle in a gown that seemed to float with her. Layers of ivory silk and delicate lace trailed behind her, the intricate beading catching the light with every step. The veil, sheer yet opaque enough to conceal her features, added an air of mystery that drew the attention of every guest. Nathan's parents beamed with satisfaction, while Serena's parents maintained their trademark reserve. Nathan watched her approach, his thoughts spiraling. Was this spectacle meant to distract from the fact that he was marrying a woman he barely knew? The room blurred around him as Serena reached his side. She inclined her head ever so slightly in acknowledgement, her movements deliberate and composed. As the vows were exchanged, Nathan felt a pang of resentment. Each word felt hollow, a performance for the benefit of the families and the hundreds of attendees who had come to witness this union of empires. When the officiant finally pronounced them husband and wife, he hesitated, glancing at Serena as though daring her to remove the veil. She did not. Instead, she extended her hand with the same calm demeanor she'd worn since their engagement had been announced. The reception was a glittering affair held at the Alden estate. The grand ballroom shimmered with gold accents and mirrored walls, while a 12-piece orchestra played softly in the background. Guests mingled, raising glasses of champagne to toast the union. Nathan barely touched his drink. He watched Serena as she moved through the room with grace, her veil still firmly in place. She engaged in polite conversation with their families, her poise drawing admiration. To Nathan, it felt like a calculated performance. By the time they left for their suite, Nathan's patience had worn thin. As they entered the grand bedroom, Serena spoke with her usual composure. "I'll have my things moved to the adjoining room. It's best we maintain separate spaces." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Separate spaces? Are you kidding me? We're married." Her tone remained even. "In name, yes. But I think we both understand this arrangement for what it is. I'll respect your privacy, and I expect the same." "That's rich," he shot back, his frustration boiling over. "You've already made privacy your whole personality. Do you ever plan on letting me in? Or is this how it's going to be forever?" Serena met his gaze, her calm demeanor unshaken. "I don't think this is the time for emotional dramatics. We both have roles to play, Nathan. Let's focus on fulfilling them." With that, she retreated to the adjoining room, the door closing with a quiet click. Nathan stood in the cavernous space, the weight of the evening pressing down on him. This wasn't just a marriage in name, it was a prison sentence. The next morning, the tension carried over to breakfast. The dining room, with its sunlit windows and perfectly arranged table, might have been inviting under different circumstances. But as Nathan entered, spotting Serena seated with her veil still in place, his mood darkened further. "Good morning," she said, her voice light but distant. Nathan sat down across from her, ignoring the steaming plate of food placed in front of him by a staff member. "Is this how it's going to be? Cold silence and separate rooms? Because if so, you might as well tell me now so I can adjust my expectations." Serena calmly set down her fork. "Nathan, if you're determined to create tension, perhaps we should discuss this after you've had your coffee." "Don't patronize me," he snapped. "You don't get to act like this is normal. None of this is normal. You've gone out of your way to keep me in the dark about everything. I don't even know what you look like. How am I supposed to trust you when you won't even show your face?" She regarded him with the same steady gaze that had unnerved him since their first meeting. Trust is earned, not given freely. And as for my face, Nathan, I would think you've made it clear that appearances matter more to you than anything else. That's not fair, he countered, though he knew it wasn't entirely untrue. Isn't it? She asked, her tone softening just slightly. You've spent your life building a persona centered on what the world sees. I've chosen to live differently. If that offends you, perhaps it's because it challenges something in yourself you'd rather not confront. Her words stung, though Nathan wasn't sure why. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. You know what? You're right. This is a transaction. Let's keep it that way. Just don't expect me to play along with your secrecy forever. Noted, she replied evenly, resuming her breakfast. The rest of the meal passed in uncomfortable silence, broken only by the clinking of cutlery and the soft murmurs of the staff clearing plates. When it was time to leave for their honeymoon, another affair their families had insisted upon to keep appearances, Nathan helped Serena into the car without speaking a word. She remained composed, as always, while he seethed quietly beside her. As the car pulled away from the estate, he stared out the window, unsure how two people so different could share a future. The flight to Paris felt endless. Nathan stared out the window of the private jet, the glittering skyline of the city of light coming into view. His mood, however, was anything but bright. Across from him, Serena sat reading, her posture impossibly straight, the veil still in place despite the long journey. The quiet hum of the engines filled the space, punctuated by the occasional soft clink of a glass. When they arrived at the opulent hotel, Nathan barely spared a glance at the grand chandeliers or the staff's attentive greetings. The suite was massive, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing a breathtaking view of the Eiffel Tower, but even that failed to lift his spirits. He tossed his jacket onto a chair, making his way to the adjoining room without acknowledging Serena. The next morning, however, began differently. At breakfast, Serena ordered in fluent French, her voice calm and deliberate, impressing the server who returned moments later with delicate pastries and freshly brewed coffee. Nathan sipped his espresso in silence, stealing glances as Serena seemed to effortlessly navigate her surroundings. Do you always act like you're in control of every situation? He asked, his tone more challenging than he intended. She glanced at him, her gray eyes unbothered by the remark. Would it make you more comfortable if I pretended I wasn't? He smirked despite himself. Touché. Their first outing was to the Louvre. Nathan trailed behind as Serena moved through the galleries with surprising enthusiasm. She lingered in front of the Venus de Milo, her hands clasped as though she were in conversation with the sculpture itself. Do you always take art this seriously? Nathan asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. She turned to him, her expression unreadable behind the veil. Do you always try so hard to seem unimpressed? That night, during a wine tasting at a restaurant tucked into a cobblestoned alley, Serena's sharp observations about the flavors caught Nathan off guard. When she described a particularly bold vintage as reckless but sincere, he nearly choked on his sip. Reckless but sincere, he echoed, laughing for the first time in what felt like weeks. Yes, she said, her voice tinged with amusement. It's bold but doesn't know how to stop itself. A little like you. The remark startled him, though he couldn't help but laugh again. And what does that make you? Reserved but terrifying? Something like that, she said, her tone light but firm. The days that followed carried an unexpected rhythm. At the Palace of Versailles, Serena's fascination with history became contagious. She spoke about the politics of the French court with such ease that Nathan found himself leaning in, captivated despite his initial disinterest. When they attended a gala that evening, Serena's understated elegance stood in sharp contrast to the opulent crowd. Though her veil still drew whispers, her composure silenced anyone bold enough to question her presence. Nathan watched as she conversed with a diplomat about the future of sustainable farming, her intelligence shining in a way that made him question his earlier judgments. For a woman he'd dismissed as cold and aloof, Serena had a way of commanding respect that he couldn't ignore. On their third day, they visited Monet's gardens in Giverny. The serenity of the water lilies and arched Japanese bridge seemed to suit Serena perfectly. Nathan, however, was restless, his sarcasm bubbling to the surface. "It's very picturesque," he said, "if you're into that sort of thing." Serena turned to him, her voice laced with humor. "I didn't realize your tastes were so avant-garde. Let me guess, your favorite artist is the guy who makes balloon animals at parties?" He laughed, caught off guard by her wit. "Are you always this clever?" "Only when I'm provoked," she replied, her eyes gleaming with a hint of mischief. That evening, they took a private boat ride along the Seine. It seemed their parents were intent on having they take part in all the most romantic tours of the city. Nathan considered what in the world they thought they would accomplish with that. The city shimmered around them, the Eiffel Tower lighting up in the distance. Nathan leaned against the railing, the weight of the moment pressing on him in a way he hadn't expected. "You know," he said, breaking the silence, "you're not at all what I thought you'd be." "Disappointed?" Serena asked, her tone neutral but curious. "No," he admitted, surprising himself. "Just confused." She tilted her head, her expression hidden but her posture inviting. "Good. Confusion often leads to clarity." Their conversations continued to unfold in layers, each interaction revealing something new. Nathan found himself wanting to find out her opinion about everything, from the best way to pair wines to why the Parisians seemed so indifferent to tourists. Her answers were always thoughtful, sometimes biting, but never dull. He thought that was a good way to be entertained during this farce. But by the time they returned to the hotel that night, Nathan felt a strange lightness he couldn't explain. Serena had managed to unsettle him, but not in the way he'd feared. Her sharp mind and unexpected humor were beginning to disarm the walls he'd built around himself. The decision to go to Morocco happened in a moment of spontaneity. Paris had softened Nathan's resentment, though his pride wouldn't let him admit it. Serena had mentioned Marrakesh in passing, her voice tinged with rare enthusiasm as she described the vibrancy of the souks and the serenity of the desert. He surprised both of them by suggesting they extend the trip, his tone casual, as if it were no more significant than ordering dessert. She agreed with a nod, her enigmatic calm holding steady. He told himself since their parents set them up this way, they might as well have fun with the family money. Deep inside, though, he was enjoying himself in a totally different way he had expected. Their arrival in Marrakesh was a feast for the senses. The city hummed with life, its streets lined with colorful stalls overflowing with spices, intricate ceramics, and hand-woven rugs. They checked into a lavish riad hidden behind unassuming wooden doors, the interior a paradise of ornate tilework, lush greenery, and the soothing sound of a central fountain. Nathan took in the beauty of their surroundings with a growing appreciation, though he tried to appear unfazed. That evening, they ventured into the heart of the Medina. The air was thick with the scent of cumin and saffron, mingling with the sweetness of fresh mint tea. Serena moved through the bustling market with ease, her demeanor unhurried, her curiosity leading them from one vibrant stall to the next. "Do you ever get overwhelmed?" Nathan asked, watching as she admired a tray of shimmering glass lanterns. "Overwhelmed by life," she replied, a hint of humor in her voice. "By all this," he clarified, gesturing to the chaotic energy around them. She turned to him, her gaze steady. "I think it depends on how you approach it. If you let it sweep you up, it feels like chaos. But if you choose to step into it, it feels alive." Nathan blinked, momentarily caught off guard. "You really do have a way with words. And you have a way with avoiding them," she teased, her tone light. Later, they found a rooftop cafe overlooking the Medina, the city glowing beneath them as the call to prayer echoed in the distance. Over cups of sweet mint tea, Nathan noticed how effortlessly Serena seemed to fit into every setting, her veil no longer a source of irritation but an element of intrigue. The next day, they ventured into the desert. A caravan of camels awaited them, their guides leading the way across golden dunes that seemed to stretch endlessly into the horizon. Nathan, who had never been one for rustic adventures, found himself captivated by the vastness of the landscape. The silence of the Sahara was unlike anything he'd experienced, profound and humbling. As they rode side by side, Serena broke the quiet. "It's strange, isn't it? How something so empty can feel so full." Nathan glanced at her, the veil fluttering gently in the breeze. "You always talk like that," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Like you see something the rest of us don't." "Maybe you just haven't been looking," she replied. That night, their guides set up a luxurious camp beneath the stars. The tents were draped in rich fabrics, their interiors appointed with plush cushions and golden lanterns. A lavish dinner awaited them, complete with roasted lamb, spiced vegetables, and the unmistakable warmth of Moroccan hospitality. As the meal wound down, Serena gestured to the sky. "Do you know the constellations?" "Not really," Nathan admitted. "I was never much of a stargazer." She pointed upward, her hand tracing invisible lines between the stars. "That one is Orion. And over there is Cassiopeia." The ancients saw stories in the sky, even when the ground beneath them was barren. He watched her as she spoke, the lantern light casting soft shadows on her veil. "You're full of surprises," he said, his voice almost wistful. "Am I?" she asked, her tone playful. "You know you are," he replied, his smile reluctant but genuine. As the days passed, Nathan found himself drawn to Serena in ways he hadn't expected. Her knowledge of art and history wasn't just impressive, it was enthralling. She spoke with a passion that brought the world to life, whether describing the intricate patterns of a Berber rug or the history behind the ruins of an ancient Kasbah. Her laughter, soft and infrequent in the beginning, had become something he quietly sought, like a melody he didn't realize he needed to hear. During a traditional tea ceremony hosted by a local family, Serena's ability to connect with people amazed him. She listened intently, her questions thoughtful, her demeanor sincere. Nathan, who had always relied on charm to get by, realized that Serena's presence wasn't about performance. She simply was. That night, back at the Riad, Nathan sat alone on the terrace, the city lights twinkling in the distance. He couldn't shake the growing ache in his chest, a mixture of longing and confusion. How was it possible to feel this way about someone who remained so hidden, literally and figuratively? Her veil, once a symbol of everything that had infuriated him, now felt less like a barrier and more like a riddle he was desperate to solve. When Serena joined him, carrying 2 cups of tea, he straightened in his chair. She handed him a cup and sat across from him, the silence between them comfortable for the first time. "Thank you," he said, the words carrying more weight than the gesture warranted. "For the tea?" she asked, tilting her head. "For being you," he replied, his voice uncharacteristically earnest. Serena didn't respond immediately, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "It's easy to be yourself when no one expects anything from you." He frowned, her words stirring something deep within him. "You think I expect something from you?" "Don't you?" she asked, her tone light but probing. Nathan sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I don't know what I expect anymore. First my parents turned everything upside down, and then you've turned everything upside down again." Serena smiled faintly, though her expression was hidden. "Well then maybe you are back on your feet?" As the night stretched on, Nathan wrestled with his feelings. When they finally retired to their separate rooms, Nathan lay awake, the memory of Serena's laughter echoing in his mind. Morocco had changed something between them. And that both terrified and exhilarated him. But he didn't want this to end. He wanted to see where this trip would take them. The heat of the Egyptian sun settled over them as the plane touched down in Cairo, the city's golden haze stretching toward the horizon. Nathan leaned back in his seat, glancing at Serena, who seemed unusually animated, her quiet demeanor lifted by the excitement of their destination. It was the most expressive he had seen her, and he found himself drawn to the way her hands moved as she described the pyramids of Giza. Their first stop was a luxury hotel overlooking the Nile, a place that managed to combine grandeur with warmth. From their suite's balcony, the river shimmered, flanked by the endless rhythm of the city. Nathan caught Serena standing at the railing, her veil fluttering slightly in the breeze. She was watching the boats glide across the water with a stillness that made him pause. "Something about this place feels ancient and alive at the same time," she said, not looking at him. "Is that the historian in you talking?" he asked, stepping closer. She turned slightly, her eyes bright behind the veil. "Perhaps. Or maybe I'm just trying to impress you." The next day, they visited the pyramids of Giza. Nathan had prepared himself for crowds and heat, but nothing could have readied him for the awe of standing in their shadow. Serena, however, seemed utterly at home. As their guide explained the architectural marvels, she interjected with details and stories that revealed a profound knowledge of the ancient world. "You really know your stuff," Nathan remarked as they walked together, the sand crunching beneath their feet. "It's a passion," she admitted. "My mother introduced me to archaeology when I was a child. She'd show me books filled with ruins and artifacts, and I was hooked." "You never considered pursuing it professionally?" Her steps slowed, and she glanced away. "I wasn't allowed to. My family, they have very specific ideas about what's acceptable. I was groomed to protect the Alden legacy, not chase my own dreams." Her candor caught him off guard. "That sounds suffocating." "It was," she said softly. "But it taught me resilience. And I found ways to keep the parts of myself alive that mattered." Nathan nodded, unsure how to respond. For all the mystery surrounding her, Serena's honesty in that moment felt like a gift. That evening, they boarded a private yacht for a cruise down the Nile. The boat was a floating haven of elegance, with plush lounges and a dining deck set aglow by lanterns. Serena leaned on the railing as the sun dipped low, painting the river in hues of amber and crimson. "Have you always wanted this life?" she asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "What do you mean?" "All of this," she said, gesturing to the opulence around them. "The image, the parties. Is it what you imagined for yourself?" Nathan hesitated. "I don't know anymore. It's what I always enjoyed. But since all of this happened, I sometimes like being on the outside looking into a stranger's life. And at times I feel like I am stepping into a new life." Her gaze softened. "That's a hard truth to admit." He smiled faintly. "You seem to bring those out of me." The conversation flowed naturally from there, moving from their childhoods to their thoughts on love and ambition. Nathan found himself speaking about things he hadn't shared with anyone, his insecurities, his frustration with being labeled a playboy when he wanted to be seen as more. Serena listened with quiet attention, her questions thoughtful, her presence reassuring. She acknowledged how he was good with organizing every little aspect of their extended trip and how he always seemed to choose everything perfectly. In return, she revealed pieces of herself. She spoke of nights spent lost in books, her love for poetry and the solace she found in words when the world around her felt too small. Nathan could see how much she had sacrificed to meet the expectations placed on her, and he admired the strength it must have taken to hold on to her identity. The turning point came unexpectedly. During one of their conversations, Serena mentioned a rare book of poetry she had longed to own but had never found. Nathan made a mental note, and the next afternoon, while she rested, he set out into the city. Hours later, he returned with the book, a worn but beautifully preserved edition he had the concierge procure for him. When he handed it to her, Serena's breath caught. She traced the embossed cover with her fingers, her voice barely above a whisper. "You remembered." "Of course," Nathan said, trying to sound nonchalant but failing to hide the warmth in his tone. "I thought it might make you smile." Her laugh was soft, but it lit up her entire face. "You're full of surprises, Nathan Whitmore." That evening, he arranged a private dinner on the riverbank. The setting was magical, cushions and rugs spread beneath a canopy of lights, the sound of the water lapping gently against the shore. As they ate, the conversation turned playful, Serena teasing him about his lack of historical knowledge while he quipped about her veiled mystery. At one point, he caught himself staring at her, the light reflecting in her gray eyes. For the first time in his life, he felt something real, something unfiltered by appearances or expectations. "Thank you," she said suddenly, her voice soft but certain. "For what?" he asked. "For seeing me," she replied. "Well, thank you," he replied simply. She gave a little laugh. "For what?" "For seeing me," he replied, using her words, while their eyes lingered on each other's. Her words stayed with him long after they returned to the yacht. As he lay in his room, staring at the ceiling, he felt completely lost, navigating uncharted territory, but very calm at the same time. Serena was becoming someone he genuinely cared for, a friend before anything else. And for the first time in his life, the idea of falling in love didn't scare him, it thrilled him. Dubai dazzled in a way no other place could. The towering skyscrapers seemed to defy gravity, their mirrored surfaces reflecting the golden desert below and the cerulean sky above. Nathan stared out the window of their luxury suite, watching the sun set over the iconic Burj Khalifa, another unexpected part of the trip he had suggested and organized almost overnight. The city was a glittering paradox of tradition and futurism, a place where the old world met the new in seamless harmony. He turned to find Serena seated on a plush chaise, her veil in place, as always, yet her presence had never felt so unguarded. Their days in the city unfolded like a dream. A helicopter tour whisked them over the sprawling metropolis, offering breathtaking views of the Palm Jumeirah and the shimmering coastline. Serena, despite her usual composure, couldn't hide her excitement as they soared over the architectural marvels below. Nathan found himself laughing more than he had in years, her delight infectious in a way that left him lighthearted and disarmed. Later, they dined at an underwater restaurant, the walls of the dining room showcasing a living aquarium. Schools of fish glided past as they enjoyed courses as artful as they were delicious. Nathan noticed the way Serena's gray eyes lit up behind her veil when a graceful stingray floated by. She spoke of oceanic ecosystems with the same passion she had for art and history, her depth continually surprising him. And he could only think of the next thing he wanted to do with her, the next time he would surprise her and share her reaction. "You could talk about anything and make it interesting," he said, setting down his fork. She tilted her head, a smile evident in the warmth of her voice. "And you seem to be able to always choose the perfect thing for us to do and then listen to me talking about it for hours." The conversation drifted from marine life to memories, Serena sharing stories of books that had shaped her and dreams she'd once dared to have. Nathan found himself wishing the moment wouldn't end, her voice weaving a connection between them that grew stronger with every word. On their final evening in Dubai, they left the city lights behind, venturing into the vast expanse of the desert. A luxury tent awaited them, its interior adorned with rich fabrics and glowing lanterns. But it was the night sky that captured their attention. Without the distraction of city lights, the stars burned brighter, scattered across the heavens like diamonds on black velvet. Nathan spread a blanket on the sand, the warmth of the day lingering in the dunes. Serena joined him, her silhouette illuminated by the flickering glow of a nearby fire. The silence between them was different now, not tense or awkward, but full of unspoken understanding. He reached for the small basket their guide had left, pulling out 2 glasses and a chilled bottle of champagne. "To unexpected adventures," he said, handing her a glass. "To finding beauty in surprising places," she replied, her tone soft but resolute. They drank in silence for a while, the cool breeze brushing against their faces. Nathan watched Serena as she gazed upward, the veil framing her features like a work of art. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding in a way that felt both thrilling and terrifying. "Serena," he began, his voice quieter than usual. "I need to tell you something." She turned to him, her posture attentive, though her expression remained unreadable. What is it? He set his glass down, running a hand through his hair. This started as something I didn't want, something I fought against because it felt forced and unfair. I was so focused on what I couldn't control that I refused to see what was right in front of me. Her gaze didn't waver, but he could feel the shift in her energy, her stillness carrying a weight that urged him to continue. You've challenged me in ways I didn't think I needed, he said. You've made me think differently, see differently. And it's not just your intelligence or your kindness, it's the way you carry yourself, the way you hold on to who you are, even when the world tries to define you. He paused, struggling to find the right words, then met her gaze fully. I don't care what you look like, Serena. I've fallen for your mind, your heart, and your soul. You've shown me more of yourself than anyone ever has, and that's enough for me. More than enough. She didn't speak, her breath catching faintly in the quiet. Nathan leaned closer, his voice lowering. I know I've been difficult, and I know I don't deserve your trust yet, but I'm asking anyway. Will you let me kiss you? The air between them seemed to still, the desert quiet amplifying the sound of her breathing. For a moment, Serena remained motionless, her head tilted slightly as though searching his face for something unspoken. Then, slowly, she reached for the edges of her veil. As the fabric slipped from her fingers, Nathan's breath hitched. Her features came into view, striking and radiant, framed by soft waves of dark hair that cascaded over her shoulders. High cheekbones, luminous skin, and those sharp, gray eyes that seemed to hold every secret of the universe. She was breathtaking, but it wasn't her beauty that floored him, it was the vulnerability in her expression, the quiet strength that had always been there, now fully visible. I hid my face because I needed you to see me, she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. My whole life, people have only ever cared about how I looked. I've met men who fell in love with my appearance and nothing else. I wanted to know if this marriage could be more than that. If we had no choice but to be together, I needed to know you'd care for the person I am, not the face I wear. Nathan swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling over him. Serena, he said, his voice thick with emotion, you didn't need to hide anything from me. I see you, all of you, and I care for everything you are. Thank you for trusting me enough to let me in. Her lips curved into a soft, radiant smile, the tension between them dissolving like the sands shifting beneath their feet. Nathan leaned in slowly, giving her the space to close the gap. When their lips met, it was gentle at first, a shared promise as the stars watched over them. The kiss deepened, filled with all the unspoken words they had carried for weeks, the barriers between them falling away. As they pulled apart, Serena rested her forehead against his, her smile warm and unguarded. He took the 2 glasses, poured some more champagne and turned to her. I think another toast is in order, he said, looking serious. What will we be toasting? She asked curiously. Our parents. It seems, after all, the old folks really knew what they were doing, he said with a wide grin on his face. They sat and laughed together under the vast desert sky, the fire crackling nearby, the weight of the world forgotten. In that moment, nothing else mattered but the connection they had found, unexpected and undeniable. The jet touched down smoothly on the tarmac, the sprawling Whitmore estate visible in the distance as they rode back in silence. It wasn't the tense silence that had once filled the space between them, but something warm, steady, and alive. Nathan glanced at Serena, now unveiled, her features softened by the sunlight streaming through the car window. She caught his gaze and smiled, her hand resting gently on his. The house was the same, its polished grandeur still intact, but everything about being there felt different. Their arrival wasn't marked by separate retreats to their rooms or tense exchanges. Instead, they walked through the front doors together, side by side. The staff greeted them with practiced formality, but a few couldn't hide their surprise at Serena's unveiled presence. Nathan squeezed her hand in reassurance, silently daring anyone to offer anything less than admiration. Weeks turned into months and months turned into years as Nathan and Serena settled into their new reality. The partnership that had begun reluctantly now thrived on mutual respect and shared ambition. Serena, who had spent years observing from the shadows, stepped fully into her role as a creative force within the Whitmore-Alden empire. Her ideas for revitalizing the brand were bold yet steeped in tradition, marrying the classic allure of Alden's recipes with Whitmore's modern edge. "I want to focus on what people feel when they taste our chocolate," she said during one of their late-night brainstorming sessions in Nathan's study. "It's not just a product. It's a memory, a moment, a connection." Nathan leaned back in his chair, smiling. "You've got the heart of a poet, you know that? And you've got the mind of a strategist," she replied, tapping the edge of her notebook. "Together, I think we might just make this work." Their collaboration wasn't limited to business. The small gestures that had begun during their travels continued, deepening their bond in ways neither had anticipated. Nathan brought Serena her favorite jasmine tea during long meetings, while she surprised him with handwritten notes slipped into his briefcase before big presentations. The more time they spent together, the more they realized how naturally their lives had begun to intertwine. One afternoon, they stood in the factory where the original Alden chocolates were made. Serena walked among the machines, speaking with the workers as if she had known them forever. Nathan watched from a distance, marveling at how easily she connected with people. When she returned to his side, her eyes sparkled with excitement. "They've been using the same equipment for decades," she said. "Imagine what we could do with a few upgrades, more efficiency without losing the handcrafted touch." "Let's make it happen," Nathan replied without hesitation. Together, they worked to implement changes that honored both families' legacies while pushing the company toward a new future. Nathan handled negotiations and logistics with a confidence Serena admired, while she infused creativity into every project. Their combined efforts quickly became the talk of the industry, and their story captivated the public's imagination. The enigmatic woman who had once hidden her face was now celebrated for her intelligence and vision, while Nathan's transformation from playboy to devoted husband and leader was the subject of glowing articles. At one gala celebrating their latest success, a prominent journalist approached them, microphone in hand. "Everyone wants to know," she began, "what's the secret behind your partnership?" Nathan grinned, glancing at Serena. "I think it's simple," he said. "We finally learned to trust each other." "And laugh," Serena added, her smile warm and sincere. "A sense of humor helps." Their love story became as much a part of their brand as the chocolates they sold. Couples would visit their flagship stores, drawn not just by the sweets but by the inspiration behind them, a tale of growth, understanding, and love that transcended appearances and expectations. On a clear spring evening, Nathan and Serena sat on the terrace of the estate, the gardens blooming around them in a riot of colors. The setting sun painted the sky in soft shades of orange and pink, and the air carried the scent of jasmine and freshly turned earth. Serena leaned her head on Nathan's shoulder, her fingers entwined with his. "It feels different, doesn't it?" she asked. "What does?" "Everything," she said, her voice thoughtful. "The house, the work, us." He nodded, pressing a kiss to her hair. "It does. In the best way." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the sound of crickets rising as the evening deepened. "What's next for us?" Nathan asked, breaking the quiet. Serena smiled, tilting her head to look at him. "That depends. Are you ready for another adventure?" "Always," he said, his grin playful. "As long as it's with you." She laughed softly, her eyes shining with affection. "I've been thinking about expanding to Europe. Italy, maybe. There's something about the culture there that feels so connected to what we're building." "Let's do it," Nathan said without hesitation. "Just like that?" "Just like that," he echoed. "You're the visionary. I'm the guy who makes it happen. It's how we work, remember?" Serena reached for his face, her fingers tracing his jawline. "It's more than that, Nathan. You're the one who makes me believe anything is possible." He captured her hand in his expression softening. And you're the one who showed me what I've been missing.